Hello everyone and welcome to the daily morning podcast of SBI Securities. So let's discuss how the markets closed on Saturday. So Sensex closed higher by 89 points to settle at 74,005.94. Nifty closed higher by 36 points to settle at 22,502. Nifty Mid Cap 100 and Small Cap 100 also advanced by 0.51% and 0.82% respectively. Moving on to the top 5 gainers and losers on Nifty. So the top 5 gainers were Nestle India, Power Grid, Tata Motors, Adani Ports and Hindalco. Whereas the top 5 losers were JSW Steel, M&M, Maruti, Eicher Motors and Coal India. Now talking about the sector-wise, BSE sector-wise advances and declines. So all the sectors advanced. So BSE Industrials, Realty, Power, Healthcare, Commodities, Auto, Financial Services, Metal, IT and Services all advanced from the range of 0.08% to 1.26% respectively. Now talking about the 52-week high and low. So around 134 stocks scaled new 52-week high. So some of them were ABB India, Bharat Electronics, Cochin Shipyard, HAL, Havells, Hudco, IRCTC. And talking about the 52-week low, so around 12 stocks traded at new 52-week low. Moving on to the market breadth, so where 2,415 stocks advanced, whereas 1,073 stocks declined. Talking about the fund flow, so the DIIs net sold rupees 153 crores and FIs also net sold to the tune of rupees 93 crores. Moving on to the global cues look supportive currently and hence we expect a flat to positive start for our market today. Now talking about the results, talking about the companies who declared their quarterly earnings during Saturday, Sunday and Monday. So first is ONGC, where the standalone net profit on QOQ basis was down 0.23% to rupees 9,869 crores. And the margins were at 45.8% versus 44.08%. So neutral reaction expected in ONGC. Amber Enterprises, so the revenue was down 6.6% YOY to rupees 2,805 crores. EBITDA was up 9% to 222 crores and net profit was down 8.4% to 99 crores. Margin stood at 7.9% versus 6.8%. So neutral reaction is expected in Amber Enterprises. Moving on to Ujjivan Small Finance Bank, where the net profit was up 6.5% YOY to rupees 330 crores. And the gross NPA stood at 2.23% versus 2.18% QOQ and net NPA stood at 0.28% versus 0.17% QOQ. So mixed set of numbers, neutral to negative reaction expected in Ujjivan Small Finance Bank. IFGL Refactories, where the revenue was, where the consolidated revenue was up 7% YOY to rupees 394 crores. However, EBITDA and net profit both were down by 28% and 57% to rupees 35 and 13 crores. Margins stood at 8.8% versus 13.1%. So weak performance reported by IFGL Refactories. So negative reaction is expected. Anupam Rasayan, the consolidated revenue was down 16.5% YOY to rupees 401 crores. EBITDA and net profit were also down by 21% and 44% to rupees 93 and 40 crores. Margins stood at 23% versus 24.4%. So overall weak performance reported by Anupam Rasayan. Negative reaction is expected. Trident, the consolidated revenue was up 6.9% YOY to rupees 1,682 crores. However, EBITDA and net profit were down by 24 and 55% to rupees 202 and 59 crores. Margins stood at 12% versus 16.9%. So overall weak performance depicted by Trident. So overall negative reaction is expected. Data Patterns, where the revenue was down 1.5% YOY to rupees 182 crores. However, EBITDA and net profit both were up by 26.8% and 28.4% to rupees 93 and 71 crores. Margins stood at 51% versus 39.6%. So overall decent performance reported by Data Patterns. Expect a positive reaction. Krishna Diagnostic, so the consolidated revenue was up 24.8% to rupees 166 crores. EBITDA was also up by 27% to 44 crores. However, net profit declined 1.1% to 18.7 crores. Margins stood at 26.3% versus 25.9%. So overall decent performance, positive reaction is expected. Rainbow Children's Medicare. So the consolidated revenue was up 7.6% YOY to rupees 341 crores. EBITDA was also up by 7.7% to rupees 106 crores. However, net profit was down 5.3% to rupees 51 crores. Margins were flat at 30.9%. So overall mixed set of numbers. So expect a neutral reaction. India Cement. So the consolidated revenue was down 15% YOY to rupees 1,267 crores. The company reported a net loss of rupees 61 crores versus a loss of 227 crores. So margins, EBITDA margins stood at 2.9%. So overall weak performance, neutral to negative reaction expected. VRL Logistic. So the revenue were up 10% YOY to rupees 768 crores. EBITDA and net profit both were down by 7.7% and 89% YOY to rupees 105 and 22 crores. Margins stood at 13.7% versus 16.3%. So overall weak performance by VRL Logistics. Expect a neutral to negative reaction. Apollo Pipes. So the revenue was down 2.8% YOY to rupees 245 crores. EBITDA and net profit were also down by 18% and 57%. Margins stood at 9.7% versus 11.5%. So overall weak performance, neutral to negative reaction is expected. Oil India. So the revenue was down 1% QOQ to rupees 5,527 crores. EBITDA and net profit both were up by 11% and 28%. Margins stood at 42.3% versus 39.6%. So mixed set of numbers. Expect a neutral reaction for Oil India. IRFC. So the total income was up 5% YOY to rupees 6,473 crores. Net profit was up 34% YOY to 1,717 crores. So decent set of numbers reported by IRFC. Expect a positive reaction. City Union Bank. So the NII was up 12% YOY to rupees 547 crores and net profit was also up by 17%. Net NPA stood at 1.7% versus 2.19% QOQ. Gross NPA stood at 3.99% versus 4.47% QOQ. Overall decent performance. So expect a neutral to positive reaction. Whirlpool. So the revenue, EBITDA and net profit all were up by 3.6%, 36% and 25% YOY. Margins stood at 8.3% versus 6.3%. So overall decent performance by Whirlpool. Expect a neutral to positive reaction. Bharat Electronics. The revenue, EBITDA and net profit all were up by 32%, 25% and 30% YOY. The margins stood at 26.7% versus 28.3%. So strong performance by BEL. Expect a positive reaction. Triveni Engineering. So the console revenue was down 15% YOY to rupees 1,548 crores. EBITDA and net profit were also down by 6.7% and 15.4%, and margins stood at 15.9% versus 14.5%. So overall weak performance reported by Triveni Engineering. So expect a neutral to negative reaction. Steel Authority of India Limited. So the console revenue was down 4% YOY to 27,958 crores. However, EBITDA was up by 19% YOY, whereas net profit was down 2.8% YOY, and margins stood at 12% versus 10%. So neutral set of numbers for Steel Authority. So expect a neutral reaction. Rolex Ring, where the revenue was up 5.6% YOY. And EBITDA also were up by 11.5% YOY. However, net profit was down by 49% YOY. Margins stood at 22.7% versus 21.5%. So overall weak performance by Rolex Ring. So expect a negative reaction. Carousel Limited. The revenue, EBITDA and net profit, the consolidated revenue, EBITDA and net profit were up 31%, 31.5% and 26%. Margins stood at 18.1% versus 18%. So overall positive set of numbers declared by Carousel. So good set of numbers declared by Carousel. Expect a positive reaction. Pratap Snacks. So the consolidated revenue were down by 3% YOY. EBITDA was up 5% YOY, whereas net profit was down 43% YOY. Margins stood at 8.4% versus 7.8%. But however, weak set of numbers reported by Pratap Snack. So expect a negative reaction. Nesco. So the revenue, EBITDA and net profit all were up by 20%, 17% and 24% YOY. Margins stood at 61.9% versus 63.7%. So overall good set of numbers declared by Nesco. So expect a positive reaction. Power Mech Projects, very consolidated revenue EBITDA and net profit were up by 11%, 15% and 12% YOY. Margins stood at 11.5% versus 11.2%. So overall decent set of numbers declared by Power Mech projects. So expect a positive reaction. Now moving on to the companies who will be declaring their quarterly earnings today. So some of them are Bharat Heavy Electricals Limited, NMDC, Eris Life Science, Metropolis Health, PI Industries, Hitachi Energy, Lakshmi Organic, Vatek Babak, Greenply, Dollar Industries, Aether Industries, and so on. Now moving on to the stocks which are likely to be in focus today. So first one we have is Patel Engineering, where the company acquired 10% stake in Shell Tunneling and Infra for rupees 51,000. So overall positive for the company. Marine Electricals, the company received order worth rupees 29 crores from Megok Technology for supply of switchboards. So overall positive for the company. Lupin, the US FDA concluded pre-approval inspection at New Jersey manufacturing facility. The FDA closed the inspection at a New Jersey facility with issuance of Form 483 and 6 observations. So overall neutral for the stock. Jupiter Wagons, so the board has approved issuance of convertible warrants worth rupees 135 crores. So overall positive reaction is expected in Jupiter Wagons. Solar Active Pharma, so the US FDA inspection at Visakhapatnam facility closed with 0 observation. So overall positive for Solara. RVNL, so the company has received orders worth rupees 148 crores from Southeastern Railway for electric traction system. So positive for RVNL. Oil India, the board has recommended issue of bonus shares in the ratio of 1:2, and the board has set July 2, 2024 as record date for bonus share issue. So overall positive for Oil India. IRFC, so the board has approved 24-25 borrowing of up to rupees 50,000 crores via bond from domestic and international markets. So overall neutral reaction is expected in IRFC. Godrej Properties, the company acquired 10 land parcels in fiscal 24 to build projects worth rupees 21,000 crores. So overall positive for Godrej Properties. Kalpataru Projects, so the company has signed 3 Aramco contracts worth approximately rupees 7,550 crores for 3 packages of third expansion phase of master gas system network in Saudi Arabia. So overall positive for the company. Biocon Biologics, so the company has received US FDA approval for Yesafili-Bla. So overall positive for the company. Rights, the company has inked pact with Bangladesh Railway for supplying 200 passenger coaches for rupees 915 crores. So overall positive for Rights. BLS International, the company has incorporated subsidiaries in Colombia and Peru. So overall positive for BLS International. Now moving on to the block deal, where we have PB Fintech, where Yashish Dahiya sold 54 lakh shares, which is 1.19%. Alok Bansal sold 29.7 lakh shares, which is 0.65%, while Society General ODI bought 15.95 lakh shares, that is 0.35%. Morgan Stanley Asia Singapore Pte bought 14.65 lakh shares, which is 0.32%, and among others at rupees 1,325.15 per share. Talking about the bulk deal, where we have Thirumalai Chemicals, where Nilesh Kishore Shah bought 5.23 lakh shares, or that is 0.51% at rupees 263.9 per share. So friends, that was all about the daily morning podcast. Thank you for listening.
Investment in securities market are subject to market risks. Read all the related documents carefully before investing.